In this video, I'm joined by one of, if not one of the funniest streamers in this amazing community. I had the pleasure to stream back with him in 2022, and I'm excited to jump back on with him today, just days after the PulseChain mainnet went live, and all sorts of things have been happening. So today, let me get into all of that and more with Brandon from Million or the Moon. Let me bring him up. Yo.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. Been a long time.
It's been a while. I think the last time, probably about a year ago, right? Last time we were on stream together.
Has it been that long? Gosh, time flies.
Time flies, man. I think we were all talking about mid-May 2022, and it was mid-May 2023. But it's good to see you, that you're here, man, because I know you're a busy guy. I know you're very, very busy on the front lines of the fat activism over there in the States. How is that important fight coming along?
I'm so glad you asked. And, I'm not sure, I'm sure you're a very busy guy as well. So I'm not sure if you've been able to keep up with some of the major news events going on my side of the things. But unfortunately, I have been dealing with a major scandal over at my previous company, A Million or the Moon. I have unfortunately had to separate and start my own channel called The Brandon B Show. And it was unfortunately due to a bunch of toxic masculinity, which is really what kickstarted this movement for me. As you may or may not know, I did A Million or the Moon with my, friend Messin, but unfortunately, it's like you hear too many things and it gets to the point where you just can't take it anymore. And I hate to air out dirty laundry, but I'm just gonna say this is what he's told me. He said, "Hey man, I need to talk to you," right? And I was like, oh, already assuming gender. But anyways, he then went on to say, I've noticed you've been getting weight. I'm kind of worried about your health. This could have negative implications, health, all this stuff. And, I didn't really understand what he was saying, but it did seem to kind of sound disagreeable. So I was highly offended. And so I decided to join the National Association Against Fat. Hold on here. Let me just look it up real quick. NAFA.org as in retaliation to this horrible, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. So I've recently joined them. I've been going to the Ukraine. As you know, there's a lot of fatphobia in the Ukraine. While I was there, many people were telling me to move, get down, get up. Just language you hear that's very, very clearly has aggressive undertones to it.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a battle, man. It's been a hard fight. I've been, as I mentioned, continuously going to Lizzo concerts in order to kind of fight all this fat phobia. But I also do crypto on the side as well.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about all this disgusting fat phobia and toxic masculinity. Just obviously being a man is disgusting these days. But let's get down to the crux of it. Otherwise, we could be ranting all day. And obviously, just being a man is not right. So I don't want to go down that path.
It's so brave.
But PulseChain just went live. The seats are still warm on the rocket ship.
Yeah.
Let's get into the good and the bad and the ugly. What's your first thought so far?
So, as you just mentioned, man, we are part of the great experiment. PulseChain is finally here. The faster, perhaps cheaper version of Ethereum that we've all been waiting for is here, and I'm quite excited. And look, I got to be honest with you. I do think some of this, bridge stuff has kind of hampered some of the hype, at least with my onboards. I was getting definitely a lot of, hey, where's my money, dude? Is this a scam? You scammed me. But thankfully, I don't know if you've been keeping up with the news, but Richard just tweeted at the time of recording 11 minutes ago, the bridge is unclogging. And I can, in fact, confirm that I pretty recently have received a bunch of my transfers. So, folks, even though this may not have been the most 100% optimal way to the chain could have possibly ever launched, it's fine. It's getting worked on. No need to FOMO, no need to FUD. I've been looking at how plenty of other layer one smart contract blockchains and even, some scaling solutions have behaved in the past. And basically the first quarter of all of these things they've all had a major dip, and that dip was the all-time cycle low. So my point is, I do think there's still a very good chance to accumulate PulseChain, PulseX at good valuations here. And so there's no need to FOMO, no need to be too concerned because the bridge is unclogging.
So what's the wait? Do we know the wait time now if we try and bridge stuff over from ETH?
I'm not sure. What I can tell you is that things I bridged over from, let's see here. Yeah, I don't want to take too much time looking this up, but I did try and bridge over some stuff recently, about a half hour ago. Still hasn't
Okay.
gone through. But the stuff from a couple when the bridge first went live is now starting to go through. Unfortunately, sorry, I can't confirm dates. I don't want to just scroll through a bunch of
No,
stuff.
no worries. So are you bridging over ETH or DAI or?
Hex and stablecoins, Hex and USDC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And it looks like DAI is the most stable coin on PulseChain. Right.
I haven't gotten a chance yet, and the point is, even though whatever the current situation is, it's likely to change. Like the current situation is horribly illiquid, and so while DAI may be currently the top stablecoin, that can change in 24 hours, right? If indeed the bridge starts to open up. Now I do know the OA holds quite a lot of DAI, so DAI may end up being kind of the premier stablecoin. But it's all a massive open question. Let me just refresh here, and I can tell you exactly how much is still on the bridge. So there's $46 million on the bridge. Most of it being DAI, 13.6 million in DAI, and then 8.9 million in USDC. So yeah, you know what? I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that DAI might be kind of the premier stablecoin. But
for now,
for now, we'll see what happens.
Clifton is saying 22% completed according to PLS burns. So, okay, it's unclogging, which is good.
Yeah, it's getting worked on. And guys, look, 6 months from now, who's going to remember this bridge stuff? No one's going to care. Like it's just short-term growing pains. That's all.
Have you heard any horror stories? I've heard some horror stories, like people selling their PLS into worthless stables on PulseChain. What are people thinking?
So I was in a Twitter space, several Twitter spaces over the last couple of days, and I forget who it was. It might have been Buckfeet who mentioned there was this one, might have been some, I don't know who, but I heard someone was tracking these different addresses, and they saw that someone sacked 20K for PulseX and sold it at, I think, an 80% loss. Wait 2 years to sell an 80% loss, and I believe it was one of the stable coins that don't have value. Well, so look, guys,
Unredeemable.
Not financial advice, but why would you wait all this time and sell? It doesn't make any sense.
Human nature, man, is so weird. Like, yeah, you'd wait 2 years and then you'd sell an 80% loss. It'd be like, I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking through my own thoughts, but it'd be like, I'd rather, even if I really needed the money, it's like, it's an insult, after 2 years and 80% down to even think about selling. I'm just going to obviously ride it out. But I guess, some people don't think like that.
Yeah, and it speaks to the ultimate issue that people make decisions based off emotions and not any kind of logical, well thought out thesis. Like something I've been attempting to mention more and more, and I'm trying to solidify this idea, which is it's incredibly important in order to mitigate the risk of being a participant in this market. We exist in a market that's so volatile. There's so many scams, there's so many pump and dumps. One thing you need to do as a noob or someone who's relatively new to this market in order to mitigate all this risk is you need to develop an investment thesis. You need to essentially create a philosophy of investing. Like what distinguishes the amateurs from the professionals in this space? Like when you look at people who like really know what they're talking about, Richard Hart, other people in this community like Gary from Funding Gym, or even people like Michael Saylor. What becomes abundantly clear when you hear these people speak is that they're very confident in their investment thesis. They've put in the work to understand the fundamentals, the risks, the principles involved. And because they're confident in their understanding of what they're invested in, they don't make emotional reactions when they experience volatility. When I often talk to my own boards, I often find them attempting to make decisions or at least lobbying to me that they should make a decision based off whatever short-term emotion they're experiencing. Like when something's pumping, oh, I should have bought more. Or something's dumping, oh, should I sell, Brandon, because maybe I can buy back lower? And you very rarely could you imagine Michael Saylor like trying to speak like that?
Catch a falling knife.
Yeah, and even though that is work, it's ultimately what it takes to have the emotional fortitude to hold through volatility. You need to put in the hard work of understanding what you're invested in, have a philosophy of investing. I don't know how else to put it. Like, how do you, I'm trying to kind of, figure this out while I speak and try and frame this in a more optimal way. But I hope I'm trying to get across the point that if you put in the work to understand what you're invested in, have an understanding of the market cycle, have an understanding of an objective set of criteria of what would constitute, you taking profits, then you don't have, then the day-to-day stuff doesn't matter, because you already have a well thought out understanding that isn't swayed by the day-to-day emotions of the market, kind of thing. And I think developing that, even though it might take time, is the thing that I think allowed me to hold through, a bear market, a 1.5-year bear market. For example, I started accumulating. I'll finish my thought soon here, but I think this might be helpful. I actually started accumulating that my highest DCA ever for Hex was at 42 cents. Now, thankfully, I had the opportunity to accumulate at much lower levels, but the highest level ever accumulation of mine was 42 cents. And I held through the entire bear market, the entire crash, and never once did I think to sell. The only thing I thought was, how the hell can I, sell more blood plasma to buy this dip? And it's because I had an understanding of the market cycle. It's because I understood that I'm not in this game for a 2x, a 5x. I'm in it for tens of x's, and I understand that the next time things get euphoric is sometime 2025. So because I put in this work, I was able to emotionally hold through and not be emotionally affected by these kind of dips, which we're also experiencing currently.
Yeah, just going back to what you're saying about having a plan, I think investing is, everything's connected in life, and investing is like a microcosm of everything. And whether we're talking about your health, or how you deal with confrontation, or how you deal with, your philosophy on investing, like you said, to have some sort of framework, because of course, nobody's going to you're going to feel emotions because you're a human being. That's fine, right? Just because soldiers train all the time doesn't mean their heart isn't racing when bullets are flying overhead, right? But because they have that training, okay, stay down, whatever, get back to base, or whatever, that their commands are there. You've done it before, where, like you're saying, people were just thinking, oh, I'm going to buy this and we'll just see how it goes. And then obviously they see an 80% dip, or they see a 50% pump, and they're like, should I sell? Should I buy? Should I try and get too cute? And a lot of the time you try and get too cute, and what happens? You get burned. So having, like you said, having that philosophy, and I think not just for investing, like for me, making loads of mistakes through my life in multiple areas, health, relationships, I have a basic framework. If I'm angry, I don't send a text or an email or have the conversation. I wait a day or two, because I know I'm going to say something I'm going to regret, right? If I feel like I'm missing the pump of a coin, it's probably too late, because it's already all over crypto Twitter, and everyone and their gran has got like a 200%, or it's up 10x. So to have these basic frameworks, I think, like you said, help a lot. And I just want to reiterate that people should have a basic framework where it's like, okay, I'm going to buy this. This is a 2-year buy, or this is an 18-month buy. I'm not going to touch it at least for that time. Where, yeah, people just selling an 80% loss after a 2-year wait, like we just talked about, is madness, in my opinion. So I think I just want to reiterate, get a game plan for everything, even if it's a basic 3-step process, and stick to it.
Listening to you say all that, I think I came up with a great way of framing it. You need to live by the lessons learned. You cannot financially afford to not learn from your lessons, because you will run out of capital if you do not do so. And so, guys, this game has real world implications. Like, I like to joke around about fat activism and all this stuff, but in reality, this, we're not talking about sports here. We're talking about people's financial freedom, people's life savings. And so it's so important to learn from your mistakes, or better yet, learn from the mistakes of others, so you don't have to live through them yourself. Now, unfortunately, many people do, in order to feel the psychological impact that will lead them to sticking to learning from those lessons. But if you can manage to learn from the mistakes of others, I promise you that is probably one of the most profitable things you could do. Like, my God, what would I pay to go back in time and teach myself the things I know now back in the day? It would have been, incredibly valuable. And so, while, I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of crazy expert. I think I have learned a thing or two over the last couple of years in dabbling in this market. And so, and many other people have as well. You have as well, many other people in the space. And so really for the people watching, if you really try and learn the lessons that other people have gone through and implement that yourself, it will save you a lot of time, effort, and money as well.
And stress and cortisol pumping through your body.
That as well. Yeah.
So have you your onboards have been calling you up, obviously talking about the bridge, and some of them have been thinking about buying and selling. What are you saying? Just sit on your hands, chill out. Let's ride this out until we see some proper stability and the bridge is open properly.
Exactly. Chill out. Don't FOMO. Because even though, the bridge is opening now, it's going to take 24 hours, 48 hours a week before enough, liquidity bridges in where we can start to believe in these prices. Because right now, there are prices on EHEX, PHEX, WPLS, PLS, all this stuff. But how believable are these prices when there's, $100,000 in liquidity and 20 dudes trading in between each other? Like, I don't know about you, but earlier today, I was on Dex Screener, and Dex Screener shows you every single buy on whatever pair you're looking at. And I was like, $50 here, $100 here, every minute or two. It's like 30 people trading this chart. And so even though we do have a price, it's not quite believable. It will take a couple days for enough liquidity to bridge in where these prices are believable. So there's no need to FOMO. Simply dollar cost average. In fact, what I like to say is, people like to say dollar cost average, which is a great way to mitigate all the uncertainty in this market. And I think is, the most valuable piece of wisdom you could share to the most amount of people. But I argue for weighted dollar cost averaging. For example, if you want a dollar cost average, 20% of your paycheck every 2 weeks, every Friday, right? What I would say is, on that Friday, don't immediately pull the trigger, or maybe pull the trigger on half of your dry powder, and then with the other half, wait to see if there's a dip and then buy that dip. And even if it's a 2% dip, a 5% dip, even in an uptrend, a parabolic uptrend, there are always dips. It's never just a straight line up and to the right forever. So even in an uptrend, there's dips. Again, the first month, the first quarter, if we compare PulseChain to its other competitors have usually almost always experienced not just a cycle low, but the all-time low the first month, the first quarter they've been out. And so while we don't know for sure if PulseChain is going to experience something similar, exactly like that, but I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that we might experience something similar, and therefore having dry powder to pull the trigger within the first month, within the first quarter on dips, I don't think will probably end up being a pretty profitable strategy in the future.
Yeah, slowing down always, man. Like you watch a movie or, you hear some story and it's like one person did one big action, it changed their life. It's very, very rare that happens in real life. It's small, slow steps. And what's that in investing? It's DCAing. It's like you said, picking the right time every week or every 2 weeks, we'll say the right time for you through when you get paid or whatever. And then, but also, being flexible, because you might see a 5% dip there and lower your average buy costs and all that. So you bridging in, was that you going to bridging in Hex and ETH, was it? Or Hex and
in USDC. So USDC. I had allocated. I'll let you finish your question. Sorry,
I was just saying, you bridging that in. Is that just for you to dollar cost average in now to PLS to PulseX? I was wondering your strategy from here forward.
Yeah, so a couple of things just to understand my particular situation. I did sacrifice for PulseChain, but I did not go in very heavy. I went all in PulseX. Put my entire life savings into PulseX, and in terms of dry powder, getting ready for the launch, the bridge, all this stuff, I accumulated dry powder in Hex and USDC specifically for this event. So I have other liquid Hex and Hex stakes that's just going to be just for Hex long term, but I decided to specifically allocate a certain amount of dry powder in Hex in stablecoins in order to dollar cost average into PulseChain specifically, because my situation is that I went very heavy into PulseX and not so heavy into PulseChain. Now, so it might be helpful to address this question in terms of someone who didn't get in at all, or perhaps went in a more even amount. I think what we're hinting at in this question is a question that we're all asking, which is, how are people thinking about accumulation? You know, we have the choice of PulseChain, we have the choice of PulseX, we have the choice of PX, we have the choice of incentive token, which I cannot believe people are prioritizing in accumulation. But hey, it turns out incentive token is actually doing not too bad right now. And in my most humble of opinions, I do think it does make sense, at least for myself, not financial advice. There are people who disagree with me. That's all well and good. And you might end up doing better than me. Who knows? But I do think there are some reasonable reasons to think that a focus on accumulating PulseChain probably does make sense. Like, something we need to consider is that us within the Richard Hart ecosystem, we're very, very familiar with the nuances of PulseChain, with the nuances of PulseX. But if you go to anyone outside our ecosystem and you ask them, hey, what would you rather accumulate in a brand new kind of layer one ecosystem, the gas token or the DEX token? 9 times out of 10 people would say the gas token, the main, the mainnet token. So that's likely to be the case with a lot of dry powder entering this ecosystem. So there's probably going to be an edge in terms of where buy pressure is going to with PulseChain. Sure, PulseX has the buy and burn. I'm a massive PulseX bull. Again, like I said, I hold a lot of PulseX, but for me, I can definitely see the case for short-term PulseChain outperforming PulseX. And we see it as well in the ratio. You know, testnet, we're hovering around a 1-to-3 ratio. Now for mainnet, we seem to be hovering around that 1-to-4, just under 3.7, 3.8, around there. So the market itself is telling us that there is a premium on PulseChain over PulseX, and I think that does make sense. And so for me, a simple weighted dollar cost averaging strategy over the next month, over the next quarter, I will be accumulating PulseChain whenever there's a bit of a premium. I forget what the ratio was most recently, but for Hex to PulseChain, it was hovering around 1 to 100 for the Hex to PulseChain pair. And I think around there kind of makes some sense. But for example, given my weighted dollar cost averaging strategy, perhaps I don't pull the trigger at quite just at 1 to 100. Maybe I deploy half my dry powder I'd planned for that day or that week at that point, and then I wait a couple hours. Maybe I go out, come back 4 hours later. Maybe it's at a 1 to 105 ratio or 1 to 110. And if I see a little bit more of a deal, then I might go in heavier at that point. So I think dollar cost averaging is great, but I think weighted dollar cost averaging for people who have a little bit more patience, a little bit more time to pay attention to the market, might not be the worst idea ever. And so that's essentially my approach. With my PHEX and my stable coins, I'll be weighted dollar cost averaging over the next month, over the next quarter into dips. And then I'll be a net buyer until 2025, I think.
I mean, like you said, obviously we know the value of PulseX and lots of other protocols, but if you didn't know anything about PulseChain, you'd think, okay, what do I need? Obviously, well, let's look at Ethereum, let's look at BNB. These tokens have done the best on their respective chains. So it's not silly to think that PLS is going to do very well. And I think there's obviously lots of other. You get the PulseX maxis who love the buy and burn and stuff, which is good. But I think that picking up some PLS, and if you've got a long time horizon, isn't going to be a bad thing to do. So DCAing in is going to be good. So with all these, with obviously the bridge being a bit clogged up, but apart from that, how has PulseChain and PulseX been running for you? Because I know on the first day, for me, there must have been some RPC settings stuff going on, because it was pretty wrecked for about half a day for me in the beginning.
Yeah, I was able to see how much I've spent in gas, and my goodness, it is not what I was expecting to have spent.
Yeah,
and I'm betting in 2 years, hell, in 6 years, that gas I've spent is going to end up being quite a lot. So, thankfully, I do think it is not unreasonable to assume that we might see a cooling down in the gas fees as we see people settle down in minting a particular coin that I will not mention for the sake of not upsetting some portion of the audience. But as that settles down, I think it does make sense that we might see a bit of a dip, bit of stabilization in the gas fee, especially a couple of days after the bridge, because a lot of people, as we're seeing the bridge unclog, there's going to be a lot of activity, a lot of trading activity. But as the bridge starts to fully function and liquidity comes in and things stabilize a bit more week out, I think we might see stabilization in the gas fees.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. I think there was, let's not mention that token because it gets people riled up. But yeah, there was a gas guzzling token causing a bit of trouble on the network.
Yeah.
But I tried to do a swap right at the beginning just to test PulseX. I wanted to swap some PHEX for some PLS. And I think it was about 1 for 100. I think I was just trying to do like 5,000 hex and like 500,000 PLS. And it failed. And then I just couldn't use the network. Like every other transaction failed after that. But then, and I was like, I couldn't even send PLS between wallets in my MetaMask. But then obviously they sorted something out because then it started running fine after. And then I actually got this through with actually a better amount of PLS, which was good. But I think teething problems once the bridge unclogs. I mean, what have we got on the bridge now? It's like over 40 mil deposited, 47 million. So
47 million. It's increasing. The number is increasing, which is hilarious to see because it was just at 46 something a minute ago. I refreshed. Now it's 47.3, which is pretty hilarious because these transactions are being processed and the numbers is still increasing, which is pretty funny. So shows you the FOMO, shows you the interest, right?
Shows you the FOMO. So hopefully, in a weird way, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I kind of want them to stop a little bit so it can unclog and then we can get a steady flow. But then obviously you don't want people to not lose interest in the chain. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard place in that. Dixon's got a question for you. Dixon Sider. Brandon, what % of one's portfolio do you think is safe to risk with farming for ink? 1, 5, 10%, 15%. I don't want to spend thousands of PLS to enable farm and go through the whole process. So
so not financial advice, but
of course,
whenever
non-FA.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, whenever you're considering doing anything with your portfolio that carries with it any kind of risk, whether it's ratio trading, providing liquidity, taking profits on pumps, all this kind of stuff, I do think it makes sense to do it with a minority. Like even if you take a loan out against your position, I always think whenever you are presenting risk to your portfolio, to do it with a minority sized position of your portfolio, because you got to think about the worst case scenario, and you always still want skin in the game to be able to continue if the worst thing happens. There's always smart contract risk. There is, even though this is a reach ecosystem, I fully think things are going to probably be mostly fine, but there is always that risk. There is a risk of impermanent loss, and so one thing to consider when mitigating the risk of impermanent loss is if you are considering providing liquidity, you want to do so on a pair that's rather correlated in order to mitigate the risk of impermanent loss. For example, if you're providing liquidity on USDC to PulseChain and PulseChain, goes on to do a 40x, you're probably going to suffer a bit of impermanent loss. And it's an open question as to whether or not you provide liquidity long enough, with how much you're providing, what the gas fees end up being. It's an open question as to what extent you're going to be profitable or not. So that's something you got to understand. For example, providing liquidity on something like EHEX to PHEX, while you might get a lower APY, APR, it's far less risky in terms of impermanent loss. Something like PulseX to PulseChain, I would personally feel far more comfortable providing liquidity for that than something like PulseChain to DAI or PulseChain to USDC, where you're going to experience probably a lot of impermanent loss. So those are some of the things you got to consider. And also in terms of yield farming too, because you asked about farming, which is a general term, which when you're talking about farming, you're talking about getting yield. And one way to do that is through providing liquidity. But another way to do that is through simple staking or mining. So folks, PulseX right now has the ability to stake your PulseX in a single side staking pool and earn an APY and APR in a token. So right now this feature doesn't exist, but presumably several months from now, PulseX might look very similar to something like PancakeSwap, where for those of you familiar with PancakeSwap, you can stake the Cake token, which is the token of the main decentralized exchange over there, and you can earn an APY, APR in different tokens launching on that chain. And even though that's not guaranteed to be exactly what's going to happen here on PulseX, it's likely that we're probably going to get that at some point. So my point is, those single-side staking pools do not have the risk of an impermanent loss, and you could use those APY APR to accumulate PulseChain. Like, one reason why I think PulseX is no slouch, and I actually didn't end up selling any PulseX for PulseChain, and I don't think I will. I would only consider if there was some a crazy great deal on the ratio, but there isn't. I don't think we'll get it. So my point is, because I think I can stake eventually, maybe 6 months down the road, maybe a year down the road, my PulseX in one of these pools and earn 30%, 50%, who knows, in one of these coins, and I plan on taking that yield and accumulating PulseChain. So, that's one way to think about yield farming. And then on the PulseChain side of things, you could, get yourself a tech job and become a validator, or you could wait, 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road and wait for someone perhaps like Alex to fork Rocket Pool and make it, far more easy for people to stake their PulseChain. So, if you're looking for yield, you don't necessarily have to take the risk of providing liquidity. And if you're asking questions about providing liquidity, you're probably a bit newer and should probably do research before providing liquidity. Like, for example, if you're asking any questions about providing liquidity, you might want to think about learning a bit more. The people who are profitable in providing liquidity are extremely confident in their understanding and the risk parameters. So I would suggest that you do a lot of research until you reach the point where you're extremely confident in what the risk is, what the ROI is, what the risk reward ratio is, and only make a decision then. And whenever you're exposing your portfolio to risk, do it with a minority sized position of your portfolio.
Yeah, I think the main premise there, which is a very, very important topic, which is obviously don't put all of your eggs in one basket. I was talking to a friend about this who's providing liquidity at the moment for PulseChain and PulseX, and he's doing it with like 5% of his bag, right? And he's getting some incentive token, and then he's selling that and for PulseChain or PulseX, depending on what he's feeling that day and how it's looking. So like Brandon said, start slow. And if you are going to do it, start with a small amount. But an even safer option would be that kind of pancake swap equivalent, which I was heavily into back in 2020 and 2021, those single-sided staking pools, because it's just staking. It's like staking Hex, right? But there's no time lock. And then I'd put the cake token in there and get more cake and, sell it or accumulate, and then or just accumulate it, and therefore my bag gets bigger and therefore I earn a bigger share of the pool. So take it slow. And I think it's good, just a small portion of your bag. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And also, if you don't know what you're doing, then, learn before you pull the trigger.
Yeah, the best thing about being early in this ecosystem is that to be a winner, you don't have to do anything. You have to sit on your hands and wait until mid 2025. The more actions you take, the more risk you entail. Like, this is the problem with trading in general, is that to be a successful trader, you have to be right constantly. But to be a successful investor, you need to be right once. Yeah. Get in early into something with product market fit that's addressing a large total addressable market with the ability to pull it off, a good valuation, good fundamentals, all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. You just have to do that once and then hold forever. And that's what it takes to be successful. So, you're with this kind of attitude, you're dealing with risk far less often.
Yeah, I think I was speaking to Walrus before last year, and he told me that I think the God Whale, who was worth 300 million at the time, had done 6 or 7 transactions since the genesis of Ethereum. So if that doesn't tell you that less is more a lot of the time in life, then I don't know what will. But like you said, the human nature, the emotions, that's why you have to have a plan in place. And I think that not only with investing, I think I have a framework for everything that I think is important, which I think is relationships, health, managing money, safety, security. I think I have these basic things. And again, I'm not perfect. Like I said, I make mistakes all the time, but I learn from my mistakes. And you said earlier, you have to learn from your mistakes. And I think one thing I've been doing for a while is I like to keep a diary, especially on big mistakes I make. If I make a real big mistake, because I feel there's something, I think I heard someone talk about it, where you write it out in hand, it kind of ingrains it into your brain, So if I make a really big mistake where that was really stupid, whether that's investing or in a relationship or whatever, I write out what I did and I write out what I do different in the future. And somehow that definitely sticks around more than just like, oh yeah, I'm sure I won't do that again. And then 6 months down the line, you're doing the same thing. So yeah, learning from your mistakes is super important. I want to change topics a bit now though, because obviously you're definitely part of the PulseChain and Hex community, but you're not a maxi, and I like the way that you've brought attention to Hex and PulseChain, because you're one of probably the first people that's like, we love this community, but we're not gonna just go all in and just end up, in a circle jerk. So you're talking to other people outside of the community. What has been the reception on crypto Twitter and in your own circles about PulseChain now that it's out, and Hex in general?
Well, it's been a lot of, hey man, is this thing really a scam? Up until now, and it's been a lot of, hey man, congratulations, disbelief so far, but also from what I'm seeing, in the Twitter spaces, and from kind of people outside our community, is really a lot of fascination behind the community aspect of PulseChain. Because what's one of the greatest differentiating factors that makes us different from Polygon, an Arbitrum, and it's in fact the community. The fact that we have a wild, fervent, sometimes cultish community. What some people fail to understand is that is not a negative. That is a wild, wild positive. That is very price positive. Like, it's so funny, man. I see people criticize this ecosystem for having, for having some people that display cult-like behavior, and they're like, therefore this is bad. But I see that same behavior and I say, no, therefore this is good because it is price positive. And so what I'm seeing in some of these different Twitter spaces I participated from people outside this ecosystem is really a fascination with the community behind PulseChain. It's really kind of speaks to why we see some meme coins do so well. Like, why is it that Pepe did a trillion X or whatever, right? It's because, for whatever reason, Pepe happened to manifest some kind of hype wave. It manifested some kind of community. And that's what drew people to Pepe. That's why Pepe did so well. I think people have an understanding that community is, and having a fervent community is what leads to success within a crypto ecosystem. And while my impression is that people aren't so familiar with the nuances of what's going on, and there is, I think, some lingering baggage with Richard, my general impression is that people are very, very interested in why there's such a fervent community, which I think is likely to draw attention over time, especially now that the bridge is open and functioning. I think that's really the thing that kind of opens the floodgates in terms of new people thinking about taking this ecosystem seriously. Because up until this point, we can't really, talk about this ecosystem as or show this ecosystem as much as we would like to, because you're not even really able to participate. But now that you are able to participate with the bridge being open, I think this kind of does change the situation, and I think will hopefully allow some of that curiosity to translate into actual participation.
Yeah, before, I mean, obviously we all believed in it, but a lot of people were like, this is just talk, right? It's hot air. And I can't blame them, right? Because it was promised as 2 weeks in like the summer of 2021. And yeah, so, but yeah, now it's here. Obviously, we want the bridge to unclog. We want a functioning bridge, which is fast and safe and secure. And then the next step would be obviously centralized exchanges listing PLS and tokens that are obviously on PulseChain. So yeah, it's just early days, very, very early days.
Speaking of which, is there anything going on your side of the fence there in terms of? I mean, I know there's been some conversations going on. I know no promises, but like, is there any exciting conversations going on your side of the fence there, buddy?
In regards to
exchanges, because I've seen some Twitter spaces or two. Is there anything looking kind of, interesting?
I mean, there's not multiple. There's quite a few people, aren't they, who have said, we're in talks with exchanges and what's not. not my department, so I can't really comment on it.
I hear you. I understand. No, I knew you couldn't, but I wanted to see.
But multiple people have said, you know, I'm not gonna name names, you know, we're in talks or this stuff. And listen, it would be amazing. Like, I don't care what people say. Oh, we don't want that. We just want DEXs. Come on, how easy would it be to send your PulseX or your Pulse to Coinbase or Binance and swap it straight for USD or for British pounds or whatever, wherever you are, Aussie dollars? It would make onboarding a lot more easier. It would make it seem, because at the moment, crypto in itself, getting someone to go onto Binance and buy Bitcoin seems like flying to the moon, right? It seems so. Can you imagine saying, hey, mum, you should get into PulseChain. Okay, what's that? Oh, it's a new layer one. But what you need to do is you need to buy Ethereum on Coinbase. And then what we're going to do is send to a wallet that you hold the keys. And we're going to bridge it over. They'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? You know what I mean? Seriously, what? I'm going to stick with my nice bonds and my safe stocks. Right.
Yeah. But unfortunately, those nice bonds and those nice safe stocks, you know, average a return of what, 10% a year, and then between inflation and taxes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're walking away with how much? So that's the problem, right? And that's why this ecosystem is worth paying attention to. Because look, man, to the outside world, we're like weirdo nerds, and we are. But the benefit of being a weirdo nerd is that we get to reap these, you know, rewards, at least potentially, you know, of tens of X's, maybe hundreds of X's in a short period of time, right? Like, that's why it makes sense to, you know, pay attention here. And, you know, I'm personally also excited for Portal X specifically. You know, PowerCity is one of these protocols I've been following very closely for quite a while. I think I was actually one of the first channels to talk to PowerCity way back in the day. And it's been crazy to see the evolution. And I think you guys are bringing a lot of super interesting stuff to the table here. Specifically, you know, Portal X seems quite timely at the moment. And so, you know, I'm very excited.
Portal X is the game changer, dude.
Yeah.
So when I was talking about getting from the centralized exchange, that's right now. Obviously, once we have, you know, Portal X up, which is going to take a few weeks, obviously, because it takes, you know, a bit of time for the devs to do their work. Then we're talking a couple of clicks, and you're going from over 60 blockchains into PulseChain. So stuff like that is a game changer. So yeah, man, I'm glad that you appreciate. Well, of course, I knew you would. You're a smart guy. You're going to see the value in what it's doing. But Portal X is, if you haven't used it, then, you know, have you played around with it yourself, Brandon?
To be honest, I haven't, but I don't need to, because you know, there's no need for me to FOMO. I have a long-term mentality, anyways. I'm sure I'll figure it out, like, when it comes out. Like, I'm one of those people where I don't feel the need to like practice up. I'm pretty familiar with things, but I understand for perhaps, you know, our audience, for people who are newer, it does make sense to try these things out, become familiar with how they work. Just for me, I just have a confidence with what I'm doing.
No. I just said that just because it's so easy. It's just like using a DEX, right? Where you're like, okay, I want to swap ETH for Hex, and then I'm gonna click swap and approve. It's so simple. I mean, and also there's loads of tutorials that I've put up on this channel as well about how to swap, how to revoke permissions. You can go in there and revoke any permissions that you've made in your wallet. So and just pay the gas fee on that. So it's that is the future, where compared to when me and you first got into crypto, even, you know, just a couple of years ago, it wasn't the same. So, you know, being able to just swap between 60 blockchains, even between non-EVM compatible blockchains as well, right? So you can even
it's a huge deal. Yeah,
it's crazy. You can even go from Bitcoin to Ethereum or whatever, or, you know, Bitcoin to PulseChain when it goes live once Portal X is up and running. So that's going to be a huge thing. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about. And that's one of the amazing things that we're building. Earn, obviously, protocol, people can use their PulseX to gain liquidity. So I'm sure that you've heard about that. That's another exciting thing. We've got Pixel Park, which is going to be an NFT platform. And obviously, we've got the core where you can, you know, stake Watt token and collect all the fees. There's so much going on. It's super exciting. We just want that bridge to be unclogged, and we want capital flowing in.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to hover on something interesting as well. I know you guys recently, so is a kind of subjective terminology here, but started talking about one of the more recent things was kind of some interesting game theory behind, you know, these NFTs you have behind, you know, your potential to stake. Like, you might know more than me here, so correct me where I'm wrong. But for the people who did sacrifice and you receive your Watt token and you go to stake your Watt token, that stake gets a 2x bonus on your staking rewards for being a sacrificer. But not just that, it just finished the idea here, and you let me know where I'm wrong. There will be an NFT marketplace where you can sell these NFTs that represent your ownership of that stake, and you can buy someone else's NFT, Genesis NFT, and improve your staking reward. So there's just some interesting game theory that these NFTs introduce, which I think people need to hear more about.
Very, very interesting game theory with what, first off, no expectations. So we don't know who's going to get the what token, but obviously a list of people that PowerCity look favorably on may or may not get airdropped some what. They might, or they may just go to some random addresses. But with those Genesis stakes, yes, you're going to get a 2x, and you can trade that as an NFT on Pixel Park. The good thing about that is you don't even need to unstake. So even if you have unclaimed rewards, you can still transfer that to another wallet. You don't have to unstake anything. You don't have to lose that bonus. So as you know, with game theory, that thing might become quite valuable, right? It's something that if you unstake it, it's gone forever. But if you keep it staked, you have a bigger share of the pool. Therefore, you're collecting a bigger portion of all the fees in the system, which is going to be PulseX, Earn, the Amplifier, Pixel Park. So it's quite interesting how that is going to play out, and we'll see who really believes in it and I guess who doesn't. But you'll be able to sell that on Pixel Park without even unstaking it, and even if there's fees there to be claimed, you can still change it between addresses. Yeah,
super excited about that.
It's going to be PulseChain is going to be a game changer, and that's why it's funny when you see people cry like, "Oh, I mean, I think we're well over the SAC. Aren't we over the SAC rate now? The price of Pulse, but before we were under at some point, and
we're just above it. Yeah, just above.
Okay. But it's like that shows you the short-term mindset where not only is obviously things going to get moving with that, but then obviously we have all these amazing protocols that are being built, and that's probably been one of the best things for PulseChain. The best things for the delay. Nobody wanted a 2-year wait. But because of that 2-year wait, so many amazing things have been, so many amazing people got together and collaborated, and stuff like PowerCity was born. So yeah, we're super excited. And listen, we're on the test net with Earn. I'm sure if, like Brandon, you like yourself, you might want to gain some liquidity with your PulseX one day. You can go over there. You can use it on V4 and just do a dry run through, right? Why not know what to do before it's live on the mainnet? And then, but also very, very clean, easy user faces. So it's nothing crazy, nothing too, scary with it. Because sometimes, when you get into crypto, even you looking at a centralized exchange, it looks like a spaceship, right? It looks like a rocket ship, numbers everywhere and things moving.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to be like Curve protocol, right? I don't know how many people are familiar with Curve, but it's a pretty famous DeFi protocol over there on the Ethereum side of things. But it looks extremely complicated, right? So the user interface, user experience is actually matters. So the fact that things here, straightforward is significant. It's a big deal.
Keep it simple and simple, clean. I mean, look at something like Uniswap, right? You go on there, once you go open the dApp on your laptop, it's one box and there's a few things to do. Why? Because have you been on Bitfinex or any of these leverage trading sites? It's like, what the hell's going on? Things are changing the whole time. It looks like the New York Stock Exchange in the 80s. It's like, it's just scary. But the more simple and clean you can make it, it's gonna help newbies, especially, who are a little bit hesitant about using it, because like you said, they're used to these kind of legacy finance stocks, equities and what's not. But what are you going to get? 7 to 10% if you're lucky. So we'll definitely see more people flowing into DeFi in the next bull market. And you said something about 2025. Do you think that's when we're going to see the next bull?
Yeah. So look, this is, I think, a very important point to take a moment to kind of reflect on. In my opinion, one of the most important realizations, understandings one can have when participating in this crypto market is having a confident understanding of the market cycle. And I've had debates with some people messing as to what extent it's useful to frame this conversation in terms of a market cycle. But I do think it is tremendously useful, because any market oscillates between euphoric extremes and depressive extremes. And in high liquidity markets, such as, the stock market, those, extremes could be the difference between 5, 10, 20%, right? But in crypto, those extremes are the difference of X's, right? 10x and a 98% correction. We exist in that kind of market. And so it's important to, number one, understand the major driving forces behind this market, and understand the signs to look out for to know when the pendulum is perhaps starting to sway the other way, when the oscillation is beginning. And while no sign gives you 100% certitude, if you look out for certain telltale signs of when the market is starting to shift, perhaps, those signs give you an understanding of when it becomes far, far more or less risky to be a participant in the market. And what I'm trying to get at here is, folks, look, the largest driving influence in this market historically has been Bitcoin. And while people within our community don't like to think about Bitcoin, there's even some people who argue that we're decorrelated from the rest of the market. I would argue that the evidence disagrees with them. And all we've seen throughout this 10-year plus history of crypto is that Bitcoin is the largest driving influence in this market. And so if you want to understand what this ecosystem is likely to be influenced by moving forward, what's likely to shape, the pumps and dumps, it's going to be Bitcoin, folks. And every 4 years, amount of Bitcoin being introduced into the market, it's cut in half with the Bitcoin halvings on a repeatable 4-year schedule, which is what kickstarts these 4-year pump and dumps. And while the influence that Bitcoin has in the market might go on to diminish over time, I would argue that that's likely to be a gradual diminishment, and that it still makes sense to incorporate Bitcoin's market cycle into one's understanding until proven otherwise by the market. And so my point is that 1 year after the latest Bitcoin halving, things start to look kind of toppy. And in fact, if you want to get perhaps a little bit more accurate with things, I don't need to pull up a chart. I think I can attempt to summarize and do a pretty good job of summarizing my point here, which is one thing I look out for to understand when a bull market's coming to an end is essentially you got to look out for markers of when the parabola is coming to an end. And if you can look out for those markers and you start to see those markers come next cycle, that's probably a very good indication that it might make sense to start thinking about taking some profits. And one of these markers has been the 50-day simple moving average. I don't want to get too technical. I won't hover on this too long, but I'll try to briefly summarize here. My point
I think this is a good point. I think this is it's not too technical. I think it's a good point for everyone to know about this. So yeah, definitely go for it.
Sure. So one of the many indicators, signals that I've found to try and understand when a bull market might be coming to an end, and therefore when it might make sense to start thinking about taking some profits, is specifically the 50-day simple moving average. Folks, TradingView, Dex Screener all has free versions. Go look up any Bitcoin chart. Go look up the 50-day simple moving average. And what you'll find is that in the last two cycles, the 2021 cycle and the 2017 cycle, this particular moving average happened to do an extremely good job of calling when the bull market essentially came to an end. Back in 2017, when we began our parabola, we started going up. We had a correction, tested the 50-day SMA, and held it as support during the bull market, during the parabola, thus solidifying that particular moving average as relevant. We continued to pump 2017, came back down, tested it, held it as support. Continued to pump, come back down, tested it, and it failed. So come 2025, it might not be the 50-day SMA, it might be the 55-day SMA, it might be an EMA, might be a band of cloud, doesn't matter. The point is you find a support level that holds a support at least once during the bull market, during the parabola, thus solidifying that support level as relevant. And then it goes on, the parabola keeps going back up again, might come back and test it, and it holds again. It might keep going, and then once it comes back down to test it, and it fails, you get a couple daily candles, opening and closing below it. That has historically 2 cycles in a row, 2017, 2021, both times that this happened with a 50-day SMA that hugged the parabola pretty closely, far better than other moving averages. It marked the end of the bull market. We never sustainably put in new all-time highs again. So if you pair this understanding with the fact that historically speaking, Bitcoin has led the bull market, it rallies before everything else, and it has reached its all-time high before the altcoins. If you look at Ethereum, 2 cycles in a row, Ethereum reaches its all-time high 28 days after Bitcoin. And so while this is not guaranteed to happen in the future, we do have some reason to believe that it's not unreasonable to suspect that next cycle, the altcoins are likely to reach their all-time high a month or maybe more after Bitcoin. If we look at Hex reaches all-time high several months after Bitcoin started to show these signs of weakness. But the point is, if we see these similar signs of weakness come 2025, this is essentially an early warning indicator, because we know that Bitcoin historically reaches all-time highs before altcoins. We've identified a historically relevant signal to look out for to understand when the parabola is over. And while this does not guarantee the end of the bull market, it greatly increases the odds, and therefore it might make sense to take profits. But you could also apply this to Hex. This also worked with Hex, and guess what? It might also work with PulseChain. Might also work with PulseX. And so, if you apply the same logic to the coins you like, again, might be a different moving average. But the point is, I've explained what constitutes a support level as being relevant. If you apply this to PulseChain, PulseX, then you got a late warning signal. And so essentially with this understanding, you have a window of time, an early warning signal and a late warning signal comes whatever time, 2025, 2026, to realize, potential profits. Because so often in the space, man, we see people throw out 10,000x, 14,000x, all the way to 40x. Richard says 14,000x, Buck Fiat says 40x. Who do you know what to believe? Bottom line is, no one. You don't believe anyone. You believe the market. You look out for whatever the market happens to give you, because the market, forgive my language, doesn't give a shit about your arbitrary price predictions. It does not care about you. The market will give you whatever the hell the market wants to give you. And so if you understand the telltale signs to look out for market weakness come around the end of a bull market and take profits based off that objective set of criteria instead of your arbitrary price predictions, I think that gives people a far better chance of realizing whatever profits the market gives you instead of, some arbitrary target that may or may not ever be hit. Hope that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think just looking at those moving averages and seeing, like you said, when it breaks through or when it uses support, it gives you some idea. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a wizard. You can just go on any, go on TradingView or anything really, and just pull up 200-day MA or 50-day MA or whatever, and just see that happening. I think that's a great place to round this off, man. I think looking at those, like you said, for people getting into PulseChain, slowly but surely, DCA, and maybe have a look at those moving averages. Where can we find out more about you online, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. So folks, look, if you want crypto stuff, if you want finance stuff, I invite you to check out the Brandon B Show on YouTube. If you want to see me deal with educating a toxic, masculine, heteronormative, conservative, wild, crazy conservative, then you can find me at A Million of the Moon. We're going to be doing much more kind of social commentary stuff on that channel moving forward. By the way, I'm kidding. He's a very lovely human being. He's a very good guy. But no, I'm kidding, folks. Yeah, so if you want some more funny stuff, cultural stuff, that's A Million of the Moon. If you want crypto stuff, you can find me at the Brandon B Show. Brandon B on Twitter, all that stuff. Everyone like and subscribe. Like and subscribe to PowerCity. Follow Matt as well. This guy does some good stuff. And man, it's also great to see you producing content once again. I think you're a great voice. You're very calm, cool, collected, which I think adds a definite value to this ecosystem where sometimes that's lacking. So it's also great to see you producing content once again, man.
Thanks, bro. I was glad to come back on and start take a little break from the PulseChain community. Now I'm back, and we talked last year. I was really looking forward to this because not only are you a fountain of knowledge, as anyone can tell who's watched this stream, but also you've got a great personality. And we got to do this again soon for sure.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Take care, Brandon. Thank you. Guys, definitely go and follow Million to the Moon and the Brandon B Show. And if you like content like this, do hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so you're notified every time we drop new videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.